It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
And welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast. Here we are on a Monday morning, the weekend. I know it went way too fast, but the good news is we've got more property news and information to talk about as we do every morning. It is the 23rd day for September. And are you currently renting at the moment and saving for that elusive house deposit, unit deposit, and finding it very difficult to do exactly that because of the higher rents? Well, rents across Australia have plateaued over the last 2.5 months, potentially, and I say potentially, signalling relief in the rental crisis. The CoreLogic National Rental Index is telling us no growth in July and August. In fact, the slowest pace since mid-2020. If you look at Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, they experienced their weakest rental growth in 4 years. CoreLogic says that while rental growth is slowing, it's starting from a very high base, and the current trend could be a seasonal effect, although it may indicate a long-term shift towards more sustainable rental growth. And as I say, if you are saving for that elusive deposit, that has got to be some good news on your Monday morning. But right now, let's catch up with Joel Dignam from Better Renting. And good morning to you, Joel. Welcome to the Real Estate Breakfast. Yes, a lot of news there for renters. But first, before we sort of drill down on that, tell us a little bit about Better Renting and what you do.
Yeah, so good morning. Better Renting, we are a non-profit working with renters in tenant advocacy. So we work with renters around Australia, primarily around issues of tenancy law reform to do with stable, affordable and healthy housing for people who rent.
And you got a bit of a members base you were telling me off air. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we're in touch with renters all across Australia, both private renters and people renting in public and community housing. Many of these people volunteer with us as part of different projects. We've previously worked with renters to track temperature and humidity in their rental homes over summer and winter and projects like that, which I guess does give us our own perspective as well at more of an anecdotal level about what people are experiencing in the rental market as well.
We have a lot of landlords, thousands of landlords that listen to the podcast. I wonder, how can you sort of frame this so that they don't see you as the Darth Vader in all of this?
One thing I think we can probably all agree on, in fact, is that we would like to see property managers doing a better job. I certainly hear from landlords who feel that they think their property has been neglected or issues not brought to their attention. So I like to think that there's common cause there. I don't think it's always a zero-sum game, and I think sometimes it is, but there are instances where what's great for everyone is where a tenant can have a secure home that they feel they can make their own, and a landlord can know that their investment property is being looked after by someone who values it and values the opportunity to live there too.
Yeah, I would say that in general, the general rule of thumb is that landlords want to do the right thing, but you've always got a percentage of people, and I think the word empathy is always going to be a problem if you've got landlords that don't have the empathy for their renters. I just wonder if that is an area that you've seen growing, particularly sort of post-COVID, where people just don't care, some of the landlords, and they're a little bit rough on their tenants in terms of their attitude is, this is the rent, don't keep nagging me for things that have got to be fixed, just pay your rent and shut up.
Unfortunately, yes. I think there's data that shows this has been a growing trend. So, for example, more landlords are using property managers. They're sort of removing themselves from the relationship a bit more. Whereas often I think the landlords who are most responsive to the properties are ones that maybe live near the property. They might be managing it themselves in some cases and often actually have more of a human sense of who the people are in the rental home.
Now, just coming back to this core logic national rental index, particularly Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, as I mentioned, their weakest rental growth in 4 years. I mean, this has to be trending in the right direction as far as your organisation is concerned.
Yes, certainly from our point of view, the rent increases over the last couple of years have been putting renters under great stress. And so seeing those increases begin to slow down is the start of a welcome trend. And we'd love to see that trend continue and for rents to ideally actually be going down and giving people more breathing space.
All right, we're talking to Joel with regard to the rental market. We'll come back after this and find out a little bit more in terms of what it might mean for you if you are in a rental property, trying to save for that deposit. We'll do that next.
Why pay a premium for advertising that's too expensive? Our listeners are actively engaged in the real estate market. Get your message directly into the ears that can influence your business.
And right now it is time to go back into Burwood, somebody that we spoke to recently, Matthew Nolan there. And Matthew, you've got a property tip for us this morning. What have you got?
Look, I think it's always important with vendors as they go to the market, particularly with houses and with apartments, with strata properties as well, is that for vendors selling homes is to always get a building and pest report done in advance. It always helps with transparency with buyers and it gives them the opportunity to come in at the last minute prior to auction and can make it a much easier transaction. And similar with preparing a strata report in advance for apartments or townhouses, it always does make the process go a lot smoother.
Yeah, and I guess people can get a little bit lazy with that because the vendors just think, well, it's not a requirement, so I'm not going to bother with it. But you should bother with it because, as you say, transparency, and it speeds up the process. What does that do? Probably more money in your pocket.
Look, it does. And I've had people come through a property on a Friday night before an auction, question whether they can attend the auction because they haven't done their due diligence. And for the sake of a building report of $500, we're able to offer it to them and say, here it is. And I've actually had people come the next day and purchase a property at auction because it was readily available to them and there was no delay in timing.
From powerful and up-to-date news to professional real estate experts with the latest property trends on the Real Estate Podcast.
And it is a Real Estate Monday. We are back with Joel from Better Renting. And Joel, as far as renters are concerned, do you think that they're likely to feel any of the benefits of this weaker market that we are talking about this morning?
I think it's still the very early days of this trend. And so if you imagine being a renter going to an inspection and instead of having 30 people queuing up out the door, there's maybe 25 people, things have got better, but it's still very tight. Or, your rent increase instead of being 10%, it's 8%. It's obviously some benefit, but I think there's a long way to go before people really get that sense that they are through the storm. So as I said, it is a welcome start of a trend, but I think it would be far too early to say that the work is done.
Different people are saying, well, there will be more choices available in a number of areas, but not everywhere. And that's probably the key takeaway. So I'll get you to talk to that, as well as in terms of households indicating about 32% of their income is paying rent at the moment, which is a record high.
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right about the regional variation. And in the ACT, for example, vacancy rates have been relatively high and rents have been largely flat, but that's not a pattern we necessarily see everywhere else. And in fact, in some cities, it's more those outer suburban areas that have seen bigger rent increases. I think part of what's happening is people are moving further out to try to find cheaper rents, but that then puts upward pressure on the rents in those areas. So it's these national averages tell us something, but often you do have to drill down further to get a sense of what's going on. I think that's true for these rent figures. So 32% of income going to rent is crossing that 30% threshold. That is a good rule of thumb to have in mind. But obviously that average obscures the fact that we talk to lots of renters who might be spending 45%, 60% of their income on rent. And often that means you've got a pretty low income. So what's left over is also quite a small amount. And I think particularly for those people who have lower incomes, that 30% limit is especially important to be getting people below that so they can afford their rent, but also afford the other essential costs of living.
Yes, and I guess the old wage growth, that is always such a key component, no doubt at your organisation, where it's a very frustrating element where it's just not keeping up with that rental increase.
Yeah, well, I think if we could just keep rents flat in real terms for a couple of years and hopefully give wages time to catch up, that would be great. Those wage increases are not necessarily distributed. Again, there's an average that doesn't reflect the experience of everyone. But I think if rents might not be going down, at least if people's incomes can go up relative to the rents, that will be something that helps people to be sure they can pay their rent, put food on the table, put petrol in the car, look after their children.
And if people are listening this morning and they want to get in touch with you, how do they do that, Joel?
Well, they can check out the Better Renting website. So it's betterrenting.org.au. But I'd hope that if you Google Better Renting, that would generally be enough to find us. We're also on various social media channels like Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram as well. And yeah, we're certainly keen for people to follow our work and stay in touch with what we do.
Social media, I guess that would keep you fairly busy, wouldn't it?
Thankfully, there's someone else on the team who handles a lot of that. But as you doubtless know, there's a lot of news in this space, particularly the last couple of years. It's been getting a lot of attention. And so there's certainly always stuff to be responding to.
All right, well, keep up the good work that you and your organisation are doing, sort of trying to help people and be their advocate, of course. I'll probably get some hate mail now that I've said that, Joel.
Well, hopefully not. I think people who might have an investment property and want to get good returns can still remember that there's someone else also trying to live their own life, think about their future and their family in that property, and hopefully everyone can get what they need for a decent life.
Yeah, no, it's just all about just sort of caring a little bit more for each other, and we've kind of been losing that, none more so than since the COVID sort of turned up and we had a lot of people turn crazy, and I don't think there's any other expression that can be used. Hey, Joel, great to chat with you, and thanks for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast on this Monday morning. Enjoy your day.
Great, thanks for having me on.
It's the Real Estate Podcast, talking properties from 6 a.m. every day, from every corner of the Australian real estate market.
In November, the election. People are very uncertain of which way that's going to go. It's been a very tight race. That just the mere fact of uncertainty makes people freeze up and they can't really make a decision one way or another.
A lot of them are late 20s, early 30s, and really being a first-time buyer in Melbourne, Sydney or Brisbane isn't affordable or a feasible option for them in the next few years. And Bundaberg's super affordable. We have an amazing amount of schools and facilities and sports clubs that are right at the fingertips of all of these people that are moving here.
Pakenham fairly recently exploded with people and became quite unaffordable. But if you're willing to go a little bit further past there into the Latrobe Valley, then you'll find that you've got also around the $600,000 mark.
The council have rezoned Macquarie Park and North Ryde again to allow for more apartments to come up. There'll be a lot more options out there for first-home buyers coming to the North Ryde, Macquarie Park area.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.